We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to eradicating human slavery, human trafficking, child exploitation, and child sexual abuse material through disrupting networks and applying data technology and advanced analytics and intelligence.
Hey everyone, my name's Ian Mitchell, and I couldn't be more excited about what we're about to do. We have a group of experts and friends of mine. It's just going to be an unbelievable session. I'd argue maybe one of the best of this entire event. Huge thank you to ATII for bringing a group of unbelievable experts and passionate people to talk about how we protect people, fight human crimes, and all the above. The title of the session, Pig Butchering Scams and the Human Trafficking Intersection, which is a growing problem. We're going to talk about the diversification of all these criminals, and we're going to talk about how human trafficking and scams have come together, which is something I hypothesized a couple years ago, and now we're saying it's a reality, and it's crazy. So without further ado, I am not the one you're here to hear speak. It is the amazing people I'm joined with, and I'd love to go around and let them do intros themselves. And I'm going to start with the order of my screens. Mina, would you mind starting us off with a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Mina Zhang, founder and director of Humanity Research Consultancy. So we are a social enterprise and also a research consultancy specializing in combating human trafficking and modern slavery.
Mina is amazing. And then Miss West, Erin, would you mind giving a little background on yourself?
Sure. I'm so glad to be here with this all-star panel. My name is Erin West. I'm a deputy district attorney in Santa Clara County, California. I work with the REACT task force. It's a high-tech task force that does a lot of cases involving cryptocurrency these days. So we are up to our knees in pig butchering cases, and so we have tried to develop some strategies that we can send out as a blueprint to our fellow local and state agencies so that they can work on it too. So glad to be here.
Awesome. Ari, over to you. Oh, and you're on mute. That had to happen at least once. No, we can't hear you, but we'll come back. We got to figure this out. Mr. Friedman, over to you while Ari figures out some muting stuff.
Super happy to be here. Matt Friedman, CEO of an organization called the Mekong Club. We work with the private sector in a positive, supportive, non-naming and shaming way. Been in Asia for 35 years, haven't been able to figure out my way home. And we have focused on this topic of human trafficking and scam centers for about 3 years now.
Awesome. And Ari, let's give you a try again.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
There we go. What you have to do is remove the fancy mic, and then the crappy mic works.
Isn't that amazing that happens? Yeah.
It is amazing. I am, Ian, thank you for having me, and grateful to ATII for the opportunity. I'm Ari Redboard. I am a fanboy of Erin West. In addition to that, I am the global head of policy at TRM Labs. We're a blockchain intelligence company, and we'll sort of dig into that much more in a little bit. Prior to that, I spent about 11 years at the U.S. Department of Justice, prosecuting a wide array of cases to include human trafficking, child exploitation, national security. I then spent about 2 years at the U.S. Treasury Department, kind of overseeing much of the national security apparatus, so OFAC, FinCEN, and sort of the regulators trying to stop bad guys from abusing the financial system. So again, looking forward to the conversation today.
As you can hear, we have some of the best here from all over the world, might I add. So we have all over Asia, East Coast, West Coast. So let's jump in. We're going to start off with the flow of, we're going to talk about the crime. We're going to talk about what's happening today and what's going to happen in the future related to the crime and the combating. But let's start with just what the crime is. And Erin, I'm going to jump over to you. Let's start with the crime of scams and what we're seeing on pig butchering and such. Lead us off, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so starting in about March 2022, we got our first case at the REACT task force, and it was a software engineer, age 30, had lost all of his money, every penny that he had, in a romance scam / investment scheme. And it was really the first time we had seen somebody lose everything in this way. And the nature of the scam as it's hitting this side of the victims, there's two sides of victims we're going to hear about today, but when it's hitting the financial victims, the way it appears is these victims will get some sort of phishing attempt, whether it's one of those texts that we've all received on our phones that appears to be misdirected, or someone dropping into your DMs or responding to something in a Facebook group. That's how our scammers are trying to get victim attention. And from there, they build a relationship over 90 days or so, where they are becoming the relationship that that person wishes they had, really providing a comforting presence day and night, texting for hours. And what they're doing during that time period is they're building a trust, and they're isolating our victims from the people that they know and generally trust. And that's because these scammers they've got a deliberate motive, and their motive is to take all the money our victims have. They are going to show false pictures of themselves leading an elevated lifestyle, playing golf, traveling in nice vacations, and living in beautiful homes, and ultimately leading our victims to believe that they achieved all of that through a cryptocurrency investment. They'll talk our victims into making this cryptocurrency investment, and they will show our victims a dashboard full of false returns showing that they're earning money in a dramatic way where they've never earned anything like this before. And the more they appear to be successful in their investments, the more they dig out every quarter under every couch cushion. But really, they liquidate retirement accounts and they liquidate children's college accounts to put all this money into cryptocurrency. At the end of the day, our victims they come to realize that this whole thing has been a scam. They oftentimes are asked to pay taxes, and they go into debt paying those taxes, getting loans against their homes or high interest quick loans. And they come to find out that they've been completely betrayed, that this love interest was completely false, that they've lost all of their money. And we're seeing just a severely devastated population, some even leading to suicide. But what's worth noting about this is the scale of the problem and the complete financial devastation of the victims. These are the new pieces of this crime that we just really haven't seen at this kind of a scale before.
The level of sophistication we're seeing that these scammers have access to, and the technology they're using to profile and target, it's just mind-blowing. As a longtime fraud fighter, it's crazy. And now there's evil on both sides of this equation. Matt, do you want to talk about this? Like it's not just, I mean, obviously the scamming is the fraud, and it's a tremendous giant problem in itself. But what's happened in the last several years that we've become aware of on the trafficking side of the world, and how do they intersect?
Well, let me talk about it in the same way Aaron did in terms of the victimization. You have a college graduate. He graduated. It's June. He's interested in kind of having some fun for the next 3 months before he gets his serious job. He looks on social media and sees that there's an ad. I can go to Cambodia, spend a couple of months, work in a casino, hang out at the pool, have great breakfasts, meet girls, all kinds of things to lure this person into thinking that this is a great kind of summer job. Person has an interview on Zoom, gets a plane ticket, arrives in Cambodia. When he gets there, they pick him up in a van. Everything seems fine. The van takes off. 2 hours later, they're in a scam center. It's a big facility that has 8, 10, 12, 10-story buildings in it. It has high walls, barbed wire. All of a sudden, there's a red flag. You know, what is this? No, don't worry. Just go in there. Drives into the place, door closes, brought upstairs, and he's told that he has to basically scam people 14, 15 hours a day, every day. If he doesn't, he's going to be beaten, he's going to be tortured, he's going to be tasered. And so you have this situation where literally, according to the United Nations, over 250,000 young professional Asian people ending up in these scam centers in Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos. They are basically forced to scam every single day. If they are unable to do that, they get sold from scam center to scam center. Sometimes if they can't succeed, they are basically sold back to their family. And in some cases, they bring them to the back, beat and torture them to death. And then they videotape that and they sell the videos, which is called harmcore. So what we have is a new form of human trafficking that we hadn't seen before. Usually human trafficking is into forced labor, sex trafficking, and so forth. Now you have young professional people from all over that are being trafficked into these locations. Initially, it was Asians that were being trafficked because they were local. Now what we're seeing, because those Asian countries are putting pressure on the countries that are doing this, we're seeing that people from South Asia, from Africa and other locations are being brought in. Going back to the scale, we're talking about something that initially started in 3 countries. Now we're seeing it in Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Dubai, Africa, Latin America. It's a real problem and it's expanding exponentially now.
We found a center, I think, in Mexico, right across the U.S. border. I mean, this is something that they've found a way to productionalize these scams using forced labor. So Mina, over to you. You and your organization have done some amazing work with the victims and really doing interview. Anything you can add color around any of the victims and the people involved in this kind of horrible crime?
I like to show things with image, so this is what I'm going to do, just to give a bit of flavor of what we're talking about here. So for what you are seeing, I'm just going to talk about certain trends. So because as Erin mentioned, we started kind of looking at this in 2022. Then in the last 2 years, you can really see some major trends, and it's not necessarily very encouraging. So for example, there were some raids conducted by some Asian governments, but right now, if you look at a lot of compounds, they are actually really back to full force. So for example, on my screen, you can see this is one of a very notorious compound in Sihanoukville, in Cambodia. You can also see that those compounds are really kind of proliferating in different areas. So for example, in Cambodia, it used to be more in kind of a west-south area, or for example, Phnom Penh. But now you are also seeing it in the border with, for example, Vietnam, in around, for example, area called Bavet. And not just in Cambodia, but for example, this is the map in Myanmar. I put it in this way so it's clear to you that how it expands. Like in 2022, you can see it's around kind of like 1/3 of the area. In 2024, right now, you can see like those little dots, it's just really becoming much fuller in the area. And actually, even in the nearby areas, there are other compounds building out. And you can see that it's not just from the satellite images, but we actually also have victims coming to us, survivors, telling us exactly where's the GPS location they were hold before. So we can confirm that this is a compound that's running scam, that's targeting multiple different countries around the world, and the victim profiles inside, including, for example, victims all the way from East Africa, all the way from North Africa, for example. And you can also see that, for example, in Laos, there's this area close to Thailand and Myanmar called the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zones. It used to be really full of scam opportunity. It still is, but we thought it's more kind of confined in that kind of a special economic zone, because that means the local authority basically have very little control of that special economic zone because it's controlled by somebody else, actually a certified criminal. It's sanctioned by the US government already. However, as I mentioned, the trend is that it's proliferating. So now we are even seeing that in the capital of Laos, you are also able to identify new compounds. And that's what's really kind of a worrying trend. Also, just to emphasize that this is definitely not only a Southeast Asian problem, because we are also identifying compounds, let's say in the Middle East and beyond. And people may say, oh, maybe it's in a smaller scale. Not necessarily. For example, in UAE, you can see compounds also having thousands and thousands of people inside. Right-hand side, this is a picture of a recent raid in April 2024. You can see the amount of people. And you can also see that many of them could be from Africa, could be from like South Asia. So it's really a very, very global issue. And the second trend is that even though there are raids, even though there are more media reports, but as Matt also mentioned, the violence we are seeing, it's not stopping. Actually, just recently in May and June, almost weekly, on weekly basis, we are hearing deaths coming out from compounds. Sometimes it's because of a torture. Sometimes somebody commits suicide in a very kind of a suspicious way, like they commit suicide, they jump off the floors. that's around the compound area. And you can see that's the reason why on the left-hand side, some of the compounds is really kind of visibly clear because they are all barred. Why do you have to put all the bars like that? Because to prevent your victims, forced labor victims, from jumping over the windows. And I'm going to also maybe talk briefly a little bit about kind of the criminal parts. I mean, there are many people we can name, and this is one of a major figure that some of the media has already talked about him, Chen Zhi, for example. So there's some compound that has been quite famous recently about certain, for example, Indians coming back to their home countries because they were like 300 of them in one of the major scamming compounds, and this figure Chen Zhi, it's quite clear that he's the owner of those compounds, and there are some studies shows about that. And instead of being kind of held accountable and trying to understand his connection with those activities, you can see he's in 2022, he was named as one of the very honorable positions in Cambodia. And actually, even in 2024, this year, a few months ago, again, he's being named as an advisor to the president of Senate. So it's quite worrying. And we briefly touched upon the scale of the problem, but I just want to emphasize that we are talking about some of the countries, half of their GDP is generating from this kind of fraud and human trafficking. And even Interpol is giving this crazy estimation of $3 trillion. Just to put things in a perspective, when we talk about drug trafficking or even sex trafficking, we have never ever seen this kind of estimation, $3 trillion. This is a number that actually much larger in many kind of a crime combined. Of course, you can always argue like how the methodologies, how do we come out with this number? But just to emphasize that this is something unprecedented, and it's I would say that we should not treat it as a kind of a development issue, but more kind of a humanitarian issue that with an urgency, like how you treat with some like a natural disaster kind of idea, because it's growing really fast, and you can imagine that's going to have some really devastating outcome to the society. Then finally, I'm just going to talk briefly about the victim, that what we realize. So traditionally, if you talk about scam or fraud, of course, you are expecting that fraudsters are like they willingly join the operation. They are just real criminals throughout. That's like a traditional case. What we are seeing that in the last 2 years, something very unique is that people being sold into compound or being purchased and trade between compounds, which is, for example, at HRC, we have a survivor leader who's called Salam. His case is like he didn't know this is scam, like what Matt described. He just thought it's a good job. So he's a throughout human trafficking victim and survivor. However, then we also realize there are some other really complicated cases. So for example, there are people who joined voluntarily. They know this is scam, they know, and they want to earn commission, they want to be a criminal. However, halfway they realize, the condition is really bad. They start beating me up. I really don't want to continue working with these criminal gangs. I want to leave here. Then we realize it's not possible for them to leave anymore. So they become also, in a sense, victims of forced labor or victims of indentured servitude, because a lot of the time it's with an element of debt. And then we also have the other situation, which is some people, they were cheated inside the compound. They didn't know. They thought this is a good job. They thought it's a legit job. However, then they realized the chances for being rescued so little. When they reach out to the police, when they reach out to NGOs, when they reach out to everybody they can think of, nobody can actually support them because the circumstance is just too difficult. Then what they decide in the end is that, okay, how about I just be a real criminal and really earn a commission and just jump up that criminal ladder and earn a good life. So this is something that we find extremely dangerous. I will stop here for now. Thank you.
Mina, thank you. You really highlighted the organized nature, the infrastructure, and the access to investments that these criminal organizations have in some alignment to potentially government officials. I mean, it's remarkable. I don't know the wrong word, but we are clearly up against something that's very organized and very highly resourced, as you all know. I want to get into the financial money flow here. And Ari, I'm going to come over to you because what we used to, when I first got involved in a lot of this, everybody's saying, well, this is just crypto. And we talk about trafficking and some of the stuff, like we're seeing a diversification of all monetary instruments being used. But what are you seeing, and what have you seen and been involved in on your area around the financial money flows, and anything you want to add around what's been said so far?
Yeah, first of all, the explanation between all three was probably the best I've ever heard in terms of the actual problem and the crime that's being committed here across the board, from the scams to the trafficking piece and the victims. Really extraordinary and harrowing. Look, the promise of cryptocurrency is cross-border value transfer at the speed of the internet. We can now move larger amounts of funds faster across borders than ever before, right? For humanitarian aid, for remittances. The problem is now scammers can also steal funds at the speed of the internet. So crypto didn't start these types of activities, right? We've had what used to be called romance scams and this type of activity for many, many years, way before crypto. But what crypto has done is it has allowed it to scale. You can now, Aaron got into the scams that are going out there in terms of crypto investments, and just the sheer amount of money you can steal. The converse side of that is now investigators, many of whom Aaron works very closely with, and I do as well, can now trace and track the flow of funds in crypto in ways we never could before because of the open nature of public blockchain. So at TRM, we work with every US federal law enforcement agency, many state and local law enforcement agencies. We have a program with Aaron's group that we call the Tracers Fellowship, where we're giving pro bono licenses to local law enforcement to use in these types of cases. And then globally, and they're using our software to track and trace the flow of funds, ultimately with the hope of seizing them back. And we've had a lot of success. Every single week I post about a law enforcement win, essentially, a case in which law enforcement was able to use blockchain technology to seize back funds. The problem is exactly kind of, I think, what Aaron and Mina highlighted is this is a huge scale. I was hearing numbers in the trillions. We saw about 12 billion that we could just identify with attribution last year in fraud and scam. So, it's just massive. And there are not enough law enforcement investigators, in the world to use blockchain intelligence tools to successfully recover the funds. So I think that the sad part is we've had a lot of success, but ultimately we're not going to be able to trace our way out of this problem. And that's why I think the really important work that Aaron is doing, with all due respect to the cases that we're all working together, is really the education piece. And it's really just sort of going out. The work she's doing around, red flags, and this is what victims need to do in victim education, because the only way to really stop this is stop it on the supply side, essentially. We have to stop there being enough interest by victims to sending funds to scammers to kind of shut this thing down. I think that's really the challenge. I'll just stop by sort of saying one more piece to this, and that is there are tools that we have that we can use that are outside of the traditional sort of law enforcement tools. In December of last year, the UK for the first time used economic sanctions to target groups in Laos, Myanmar, China, Cambodia, and elsewhere that were sort of engaged in the activity that this group just described a few moments ago. Say hey, if you want to conduct this activity, you're not going to have access to the UK financial system. We could do the same here in the United States by using sanctions in that way. So there are national security. Mina called this a humanitarian problem. I see this as a national security problem. And we need to really ensure that we're using sort of every tool in our toolbox to go after these networks.
Can I maybe Aaron, I'll direct this to you before we move into kind of what's being done. And actually, Aaron, feel free to go right into some of the work I know you and your organization and your efforts are doing. But I want to dig into the money flow real quick. These scammers, whether they're trafficked victims or they're organized criminal scammers that are in the business of scamming and they're knowing, they're convincing us, and they target Ian, and they convince me to send money to them, and I'll use a person-to-person payment, I'll use ACH, I'll use wire, in some cases I'll buy gift cards. There's all these instruments being used. Am I oversimplifying it to say that all of those instruments are stripping point level monetary benefit, but are they put through cryptos at Bitcoin ATMs and such, and that's used to mule money out of the country? Because I also know there are wires going out of the country and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So where does the whole monetary system fit into this crime? And maybe,
Aaron's chomping at the bit. You go, Aaron.
I have to take a crack at that. Look, from the crypto angle, obviously, They are often targeting, folks who do not have direct access to sort of like, crypto exchanges or hardware wallets. So they will go to a Bitcoin ATM. They will, take out funds. They will send funds to a crypto address that the scammer gives them, and that's when they start to move the funds. And look, when the funds move very quickly when they hit the sort of crypto ecosystem, and it really becomes a race between law enforcement and that scammer to an exit point. Because the reality is that you still need to convert that cryptocurrency to fiat today to use it in a meaningful way. We may live in a future state where that's not true, but today, really, what you're seeing there is you're seeing that scammer get those funds into their address and try to move them as quickly as possible in essentially a race. And they'll use money laundering techniques, obfuscation techniques. They'll move them across different blockchains. They'll take Bitcoin and convert it into a stable coin like USDT. And it'll become this sort of, so I think you named a bunch of different pieces to this thing, and there are so many right now. As much as I hate to say it, crypto plays a huge role, and it really does become this race between scammers on blockchains. You see me using my hands because I visualize everything in a graph. But like oftentimes, like we're sharing the graphs of what this looks like, and it looks like a giant spider web because they're moving funds across different blockchains, ultimately to these exit points.
Sorry, Ian, if I could just add something to that. I mean,
please.
Sorry.
Go for it, please.
Yeah, I mean, we often talk about the scamming and the crypto and getting into fiat, but the money laundering aspect is really beginning to open up as well. For example, here in Singapore, there was a case of around $3 billion of money laundering mechanisms that were used buying luxury apartments and cars and bags and various other things. So fiat to making it into something that will go all over the world is an aspect that I think is beginning to get more attention. It wasn't so much talked about, it would be mentioned just like what we did now, but it's another area that I think we really have to spend a lot of time focusing on.
So I want to pivot to what's being done today. And there's a lot being done today, but I'm going to let Aaron lead the charge because one of the cool things that's being done today is Project Shamrock and the work you've been doing. But I don't want to talk about that. I want to lead it over to you. Can you start us off by what's being done today by the community, the broader community, to come against all angles of this?
Sure. I think Ari led me right into it when he started talking about something that I say all the time, that this is a speed game. And so one of the things, I started this group called Operation Shamrock. Operation Shamrock, the whole point of that was that instead of each doing our own pieces in silos, it makes sense to bring together the entire life cycle of this crime, from social media, where they are gaining entry to our victims, to banking, to crypto exchanges, to local, state, federal, international law enforcement, to diplomacy, to victims, to NGOs, that we are all part of this and we all need to work together. One of the specific things we're working on is exactly what we were talking about. How do you get a victim in front of a qualified investigator who knows how to use the blockchain as an investigative tool in the shortest amount of time possible? So there are literally 15 specific goals that are being looked at Shamrock, but this one fits right into the conversation. And that is, how do we get the victim who shows up in Tuscaloosa, Florida to, and I say Tuscaloosa because they actually do know what they're doing in Tuscaloosa, but say it's them, and there isn't someone at their local law enforcement agency who knows what this is. That's where we are trying to fill in the gap. We are trying to be a location where that victim can provide information to their local law enforcement to connect them with us. And we have a group of law enforcement, many of whom are using the tool that Ari's firm provides and we've learned how to use it, and we can immediately take a peek at what's happening with that victim and make any freezes or seizures that need to be done. We are working diligently to fill in the gaps, the knowledge and education gaps about how to help victims. And that's just one of the pieces that we're working on right now. A lot of the other things that come up for us are how can we look at enforcement and how can we hold these people accountable on the other side of the world, even when they are in jurisdictions that are not amenable to US law enforcement. And so we have to look at workarounds and we have to look at economic sanctions. There's plenty of opportunities there. I also am a big proponent that we should issue indictments and complaints against these bad actors and work with neighboring countries to arrest them when they go visit their beach house in Phuket. I think there are plenty of opportunities to get our hands on these really bad actors. And I think that our world demands that. I was part of a research group that wrote a paper with the United States Institute of Peace. And when we presented in DC, one of the Deputy Assistant Secretaries of State called this a national security problem. This is 100% an issue that needs to be on everyone's radar when we are transferring an entire generation's worth of wealth into the hands of bad actors.
I'm so grateful that you've been so vocal on this topic for the last several years, and it does. I mean, back to what Mina said about the organized infrastructure and the support potentially of governments or former government officials on this. It does. There's a tactical level, which I know you and many others on the phone are trying to mobilize. I know the Noble is too. There's the tactical, and then there's the big picture stuff, which I think you've mentioned that you're tackling too, which is huge. Can we talk about what's happening? We talked about the scam side of the equation, but what's happening on the trafficking for the trafficking victims, the ones who have been, can we pivot there? Mina, maybe you can start us off. What's happening on
Yeah, I can share a little bit also our initiative. And actually, before I do that, I realized there's one more slide I wanted to talk about. And actually, that also kind of echoes what Erin and Ari was saying. It's just how the whole ecosystem is. So, for example, at HRC, we're monitoring some of the Telegram groups that criminals are using on a day-to-day basis. Then you can see, for example, they specialize certain teams are more data scrapping. The other one is selling SIM card. The other one is building the fraud websites. They tell you how much it costs to build a fraud website. There will be, for example, the script writing. So we commonly talk about pig butchering because this is one of the earliest known form, but definitely is way beyond pig butchering. I can talk about sport gambling scam. I can talk about sextortion. I can talk about all different kinds of scam. The idea is the criminals are always trying to find a new story that they can scam you. So it's always evolving. Then we can also talk about, for example, some of the Telegram groups will be how to developing, for example, human trafficking, that they are trading human beings, that they're actually saying how much is the price, where are they located. There will be definitely lots of Telegram groups also about money laundering. So I'm just emphasizing how this is very much a supply chain as you think about any other kind of supply chain, for cars, for computers. It's very complicated. It's very detailed. It's very specialized, and that's what we are seeing these days. In terms of what we are doing at HRC now, one of the very key kind of initiative that we are trying to do is to support organized fraud to be recognized as one of a transnational organized crime under the UN Convention against the transnational organized crime. So just few words about what it is. So this is one of a kind of instrument in really globally defining what is a transnational organized crime. So commonly we heard about, for example, Prolima Protocol. That's what we talk about definition of human trafficking in person, and that's actually one of the protocols supporting this convention. So for example, trafficking in person or smuggling of migrants or firearm smuggling, these are all recognized as transnational organized crime. And of course, right now in this convention, there's no mention about fraud, because of course, when it was drafted at that time, it didn't really foresee what we are seeing right now. But what HRC we are recognizing is that this is an issue that's so global that none of the countries can individually solve it. And actually, if you try to kind of share the awareness one by one in every individual country, it will just take forever. So we think there's an important element. I mean, in parallel with all this, everything we are doing in every country, it has to be something just the whole world coming together to recognize the importance of this. And just to kind of jump into a bit more details why we think it's important. So for example, some of the countries now, we are still seeing some extremely light sentencing when it comes to fraudsters, something around 1 year or 6 months for somebody who scammed millions of monies of other people. And a lot of the time, it's possible to never go into the jail. It's basically you just need to pay some money and you will never serve any like jail sentence. So there's no international standards yet. And of course, I can also equally tell you some countries are being extremely harsh. You may even face like death penalties by doing fraud. So we don't have any kind of standards yet at the moment. And also certain countries, their general kind of method just to put people into jail, but never really think that much about how about like asset forfeiture. So that's also another element that we would really love to propose, because essentially this is a financial crime. If you put people in jail and never take their money, they will come out and continue doing that. The second thing is also we realize that a lot of fraudsters, after serving the jail terms, they really just join the fraud operation again. Like there's no real incentive for them to change. So I'm describing this as a bit of an addiction, because it's very low investment. It's not like you are murdering somebody. Like the amount of guilt, a lot of criminals, fraudsters, they are kind of justifying this as okay. They sometimes think, okay, yeah, Wall Street is also doing those kind of rip-off, whatever, global financial system is not accurate. So anyway, let's just try to try whatever we can. So it has a very easy moral excuse for a lot of youngsters. I mean, when I say young people, I mean a lot of them are actually in 20s or 30s or sometimes even underage. And the reward is very high. So what we are saying is that as what we say, generation of money is being like lost to fraudsters. Also, another generation of youngsters is actually actively joining scam and feeling this is okay. So we are, I mean, HRC, we are a combating human trafficking organization. We work a lot with tip victims. And we also emphasize a lot about, reintegrations, how the state has led responsibility to really support trafficking victims to come back to their normal life, to heal. But equally, also, we realize to really solve this issue about fraud, you have to also allocate resources in the rehabilitations of perpetrators, because also when the perpetrators are particularly young, just like about their 20s or even underage, how are you going to do with those people? Are you going to allow them to continue this journey of being a fraudster? The sad thing is also because this is extremely global. Like we may see the kingpin from country A and the victims are forced labor from country B. The operation size country C. Scam victim country E. Money laundered in country F. I can go on. I can give you even more. This is our old reality. It's even more complicated than that. So which country are going to initiate all the operation? All of them can actually pinpoint and say, oh, this is not my job, and maybe just try to find other people. And equally, if they start, also they don't have all the evidence and all the information to actually do a successful prosecution. So, and you can also see that the money is flowing to certain directions why certain country might feel not that much incentivized to do the prosecution. So
I want to stop here because I think this feeds really nicely to what Aaron said, and I'd love to, if it's okay. I want to go to Matt to talk about so we talked about, Aaron, you mentioned and it was just reinforced by Mina, the country by country risk, the global problem we have. So what's being done, Matt, from your knowledge? You're traveling all around the world to actually disrupt these scam centers, get in front of the local governments, rescue people and these local sites. What's being done today on that?
Well, there's a couple of different aspects of this. There's the government response, the private sector response. Let me start with the government response. I was recently in Cambodia, and I was talking to some ex-government officials who were basically saying that, for a while, raids and rescues were taking place, but then they stopped picking up the phone from the governments that were putting pressure on them because there were so many people getting rich off of this. They're getting kickbacks and bribes and everything else. And so because you have such a large amount of money, it's really difficult to address this. So our organization focuses on the human trafficking side. And what we try to do is to kind of educate potential victims about the fact that if a job seems too good to be true, it probably is, and you should not focus on it. And so, for example, in mainland China, there was a lot of social media information basically saying, don't go to Cambodia, don't go to Myanmar because you'll have these issues. But now what's happened because of the proliferation, it's now in Vietnam, it's now in the Philippines, it's now in Dubai and so forth. And so the messaging needs to be done in such a way that you basically say, if somebody approaches you and they ask for this type of information and they're promising this type of job, then these are the things that you need to do to protect yourself. So we've developed commercials, e-learning mechanisms that basically say these are the 10 things that you need to do to protect yourself. But what we also try to do is to ensure that it's in the language that the person needs it in. The interesting thing about human trafficking is that 90% of the information is generally in English, but 90% of the people need it in another language. And so what we do is we take the information and we put it in multiple languages, try to get in front of these people to say, here's the information that you need. We have a website that is a Scam Watchers website that allows for people who think that they might be moving in the direction of taking on some type of a job. They don't really know whether or not it's real or not, to get the specific information that they need and so forth. The last thing I'll say is on the social media side, it's really important for the companies that allow for job advertisements to understand the relevance and the importance of making sure that these ads are real. Because many of the victims are finding themselves in this situation simply because they go on a particular website or social media platform, they see it, it looks like it's real, they have communication back and forth, they have Zoom interviews, everything seems above board until they eventually get into that situation. One other thing just to say related to what Mina said is sometimes these victims are rescued and then they're sent home, but then they get arrested. They get arrested because they were scamming people in that location. According to the Palermo Protocol, if you're a victim of human trafficking, you get a get out of jail free card and somebody supports you if you're a trafficking victim. But this is not really what's happening now, because it really hasn't caught up to the legislation related to the Palermo Protocol. So the work that you were describing, Mina, and moving in that direction of raising awareness of this particular issue is an extremely important part of the process to help those victims get back on their feet and get the counseling and the support that they need so that they don't end up back in these scam centers.
So we could go a lot longer on this, but I want to move into the next section. I'm going to add one more thing just on the financial services side, but I want to, as I say this, I want you all to prepare in a lightning round kind of respect what's broken and what needs to get done. What I do want to do is, as a career fraud fighter and banker, I want to just share, fraud typically wasn't recognized at banks, a scam wasn't recognized at banks as a fraud because there's no liability or loss there. It was a hole in the armor of financial institutions. And I will just tell you what's being done today is banks, not all of them, but a lot of them are mobilizing their defenses to actually start recognizing fraud. The Federal Reserve in the US has done something. The UK, Singapore, Australia, Canada, they're all trying to start catching up their anti-fraud programs. So we've got a long way to go, but as a fraud fighter, there's a lot being done around technologies and innovation. We need to do more. I just wanted to plug that for the financial services side of the world. So I want to get into this lightning round. Ari, I'm going to let you kick us off here. I want to know, and you talked about, and the reason I didn't come to you on the tools is you talked about your system and how cool it is. You need to check this out. Everybody needs to check out your system and your technology on tracing kind of crypto. What's broken, Ari? What needs to change? Where are we going in controls? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And look, I think all roads lead to the education piece on this. And one thing I love, I've seen Alona Katz, who's a DA doing a lot of great work in Brooklyn, even when they're doing their press releases around the cases that they're doing, right? They've seized back funds, they've made arrests, whatever it is, they're also providing red flags. So I feel like, and I know Aaron's always shouting this stuff from the rooftops, but like, for the love of God, do not send cryptocurrency to somebody that you do not know, right? Like if someone is promising you oversized returns, right? If something's too good to be true, it is too good to be true. Like we have to keep hammering home the red flags so people aren't engaging with these bad actors in the first place. So I think that's something we can do a great job. Whenever I talk to a member of Congress on other issues, NatSec issues that I deal with a lot, or other types of global issues, I always say, hey, you want to do a training for constituents on these types of scams and fraud. So I think it's leading with the education piece. And Matt mentioned sort of like, the industry also working to police itself. I think that we could really lean in on the social media piece. We run a website called chainabuse.com with some of the leading cryptocurrency companies in the world, to include Binance and Circle and others. And it's the largest reporting database for fraud and scam. So if you are a victim, if you see a fraud or scam on social media, you report it there. We've had hundreds of thousands of reports just in the last couple of years. So like there are things that we could be doing, but it's like all roads lead to education. I would love to say, hey, we can track and trace the flow of funds and seize them all back. But the reality is that you can do that on a case-by-case basis. But like to stop the problem, we really have to do this at scale, and it comes down to education.
You mentioned Too Good to Be True. I do have to plug a song I wrote for a TikTok campaign called Too Good to Be True. So if anyone likes music, go check out that song. So Aaron, over to you. So the crime, where's the crime going, and what do we need to do to modernize? Where do we need to go? Like, what needs to happen so that we actually can start getting ahead of this?
I like the all roads lead to education, but I would also say all roads lead to collaboration. I think what we are having is there are a lot of people who are existing in the worlds they've always lived in and say, well, we can't do this. I can't share that. I'm not used to talking to private. I'm not used to talking to public. We have got to realize that this is good guys against bad guys. This is no joke where we are living right now. And we've got to figure out ways to get along better and communicate better and be willing to bend just a little bit further than we normally would to try and share information that needs to be shared to take down a global threat. It's as easy as that. So I love education. I'm going to educate all day. I talk nonstop about this, but we've also got to collaborate.
I love that. Aaron, can I ask you, is this crime going away anytime soon? Is it going to keep getting worse?
No, it's not going away anytime soon. And it's only getting worse. I mean, Mina's photographs show you, and they keep popping up, more and more compounds. This is a lucrative, systematic way to really crush us. And there hasn't been nearly enough friction. And so because there's no friction, why wouldn't they continue with this bad behavior? So that's why it's us against them.
There goes my thumbs up. Sorry, guys. That's awesome. I love it. But I should have said thumbs up on collaboration. Mean it over you. So what is it getting worse, and what do we need to do going forward?
Yeah. So the other part of my work is a lot about like fishing industry and forced labor. And that's something that come up 10 years ago. And only after 10 years now, we start seeing all the different organizations or even some government legislations really kind of come together. So as much as I feel the issue of a scamming compound and the victim and human trafficking related to scamming compound is so close to my heart, I also realize that we are very often still in our small bubble. So all the audience, when you're watching this, we really need you to spread the words. Because if you talk about child labor in the cocoa industry, in chocolate industry, nobody's going to be like, what's that? People know that already. If you talk about forced labor in cotton industry, people know that, have some sense. However, if you tell them about human trafficking and scam, they're like, what? First time I heard about that, really? So this, we are still kind of early in the infancy of this fight, even though we really urgently need to take this much faster and bigger scale. And as we, talk several times about, this is national security issue, like we need to treat it with a security issue type of, also solutions, because right now, all what we are doing, it's a lot of really not taking that scale. Like, I mean, initially, for example, HRC, we support quite a lot about victim repatriations and then some other kind of rescue. But it's really, really sad because, as we say, compounds are expanding. And when you try to remove somebody from a compound and they are not really closing down, then what it means is like there are other people still suffering inside. It's really, 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 really heartbreaking. So what we need is to try to end those compounds from the beginning. And that really takes not just the police going to raid. It actually takes some really like foreign policy and other kind of more major tactics to stop that. So that's, I hope, quickly we can come to that stage. Yeah.
Good, great thoughts. Matt, over to you.
All roads go to education. All roads go to collaboration. I'll say one more: consolidation. I really feel like what we're dealing with here, and we've talked about this, a national, global security issue. We're talking about huge amounts of money that's going into the hands of criminals. This is going to result in franchising of crime. The crime centers getting to the point where they're so organized that we're not going to be able to stop this. I was asking in a webinar what I thought would be needed, and I feel like we need like a command center. We need a kind of a physical space to take the Shamrock type things and bring people together and then do what the anti-terrorism world does, which is to have a brain that links everybody up in such a way that we're able to really address this. Short of that, you have these silos, you have these individual organizations working on this. It's not enough. This is almost like a 10 alarm fire for which the building is burning and we have a garden hose. We are not there yet. The world has the capacity to address this. We have the mind power to address this. We have the people to address this. What we need to do is to bring those together with a sense of urgency and to do it in such a way that we address this before it gets way, way out of hand. It's already out of hand, but way, way out of hand. And that's really what's needed here. So for anyone who's on this, just look into this. You know, there are documentaries on this. There's a lot of material out there, and you will realize that what we're dealing with here is very serious, and we all have to take a part in addressing this. And that's the only way this is going to go away.
So you guys, I'm going to land this plane because we're over time and we could keep going. I mean, I got to tell you, I learned something every time I'm with you all. You are such blessings to this fight. Clearly, there's tons of reasons to find ourselves in despair, but just look at the 4 people that are on this, that I'm on this call with, and there's reasons to be hopeful. They're mobilizing people all over the world in all their capacities to do some good in the world. And I tell you, if this group that you're listening here, you're on this for a reason, you're put in your position for a reason, you're there for a reason, it's time for us to spread the word, get involved in whatever capacity we can do good, because there are people being bought and sold and money stolen. I think back to generational wealth. I think Aaron brought it up. You guys are amazing. I can't say thank you enough for who you are and what you're doing. Again, thank you to ATII. I know we could have gone much longer, and I think next year or hopefully sooner, you should get everybody here and give them their own full 45 minutes to an hour. That we've only scratched the surface to the goodness of the group gathered here. Please check out all of the organizations that everyone's from here, and keep doing good where you are. Aaron, Mina, Matt, and Ari, thank you so much for spending time with us and bringing your expertise to this session.
Ian, you're the man. Thanks for having us.
Thank
Yep.
you, everyone.